There's a couple things about the Munsters that people may or may not be aware of. Number one, there was a pilot made with a different Eddie and a different mom. The network saw the pilot, they greenlighted the show, but they wanted to adjust the mom and the kid. So that was kind of a weird last minute casting call situation.
There is a house at the end of Mockingbird Lane that no one in the neighborhood wants to walk past after dark. The weeds grow up past the fence posts. Cobwebs hang from the eaves like curtains. And on any given Thursday evening in 1964, over 20 million Americans sat down in front of their television sets to watch whatever was living inside it. This is the story of the Munsters, and it goes much deeper and gets much stranger than you probably remember. The infamous episode of the Munsters. Here's something worth sitting with for a second. The family you came to love at 1313 Mockingbird Lane almost never made it to your screen at all. And the version that was almost made would have looked so different from what you know, you probably wouldn't have recognized it. Let's go back to where this whole thing starts, which is, genuinely, not where most people think it does. The concept of a comedic monster family living an ordinary suburban life had been bouncing around creative circles since the mid-1940s. The idea originated at Universal Studios, where animator Bob Clampett first proposed a humorous monster family as an animated series, but the project stalled entirely. It just sat there, going nowhere for the better part of 2 decades, until the early 1960s, when the cultural moment finally caught up to the idea. Interest was revived in 1963 when writers Alan Burns and Chris Hayward submitted a similar concept while working on The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. Think about that lineage for a moment. The same creative energy that gave us a moose and a flying squirrel navigating absurd Cold War satire was now being pointed at Frankenstein's monster, trying to figure out why his neighbors kept fainting on the front porch. That's a specific kind of comedic mind at work, one that understood that the joke isn't in the monster, it's in the monster's completely baffling obliviousness to being a monster. Now, even after Burns and Hayward got the ball rolling, the debate inside the studio was genuinely unsettled. Although animation was initially considered, Universal ultimately decided on a live-action format. That decision, which probably felt fairly routine at the time, turned out to be everything. Because you can draw a funny Frankenstein, sure, but you cannot manufacture the specific alchemy of a real human being sitting in a makeup chair for 2 hours every single morning, and then walking onto a set and making it feel warm and genuine. That requires people. Very specific, very particular people. The producers tapped to actually make the show were Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, who were already known for creating the Leave It to Beaver television series. And that creative parentage matters more than it might seem at first. Leave It to Beaver was the gold standard of wholesome American family television. It was Ward and June Cleaver and apple pie and well-ironed school clothes and a very particular vision of what the American family was supposed to look like. By handing the monster family concept to the men who built that template, Universal was essentially guaranteeing a specific tonal approach. This would not be a horror show wearing a comedy hat. This would be a family show, full stop, that just happened to feature a Frankenstein's monster and a vampire as the parents. The pilots no one was supposed to see. So the writing was happening, the producing was happening, and by early 1964, it was time to actually put something on film. And this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating, because what ended up on screen in September 1964 was not, by any measure, the first version of what these characters were supposed to be. Not even close. A color pilot titled My Fair Munster was filmed in early 1964 for CBS by MCA Television. Color. That detail is going to come back around later in a way that feels almost cruel. But for now, just hold on to it. The show that America eventually fell in love with, That iconic black and white world of creaking doors and Gothic staircases started its life in full color, being pitched to network executives on a color reel. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis were the first to be cast, early in February 1964. They had recently completed the series Car 54, Where Are You?, and had good chemistry together. The casting of those two specifically makes a kind of logical sense in retrospect. Gwynne was physically extraordinary, a Harvard-educated actor who, according to Britannica, possessed a lanky and towering physique which, coupled with his distinctive high forehead and long-jawed face, made him a natural to portray the Frankensteinian Hermann Munster. And Lewis was something else entirely, a performer with an almost theatrical energy, the kind of actor who could make a glass of warm milk feel like a mischievous proposition just by the way he picked it up. But the rest of the cast in that first pilot? Almost entirely different people. The initial presentation pilot featured Joan Marshall as Herman's wife, then named Phoebe, Beverly Owen as Marilyn, and Nate Happy Derman as Eddie. Phoebe, not Lily. The wife, who would become one of television's most iconic maternal figures, had a completely different name, a completely different look, and was played by a completely different actress in that first version. And the look of Phoebe Munster was a specific problem. According to reviewers on IMDb, Phoebe had a Vampira look, and Vampira was inspired by the cartoons of Charles Addams, which became the basis of The Addams Family, which first aired the same year as The Munsters. The network looked at Joan Marshall's portrayal of Phoebe and saw Morticia Addams staring back at them. Two shows, both in development, both featuring monster families, and now the wives looked like they could be the same person. That was a problem serious enough to prompt a complete overhaul. Network executives quickly became concerned that Phoebe was nearly identical to Carolyn Jones's Morticia Addams on the soon-to-premiere The Addams Family, prompting a retooling of the character. So Marshall was out, and the search for a replacement led to one of those real-life backstories that you almost couldn't make up, because the actress who ultimately took the role didn't take it for reasons of ambition or career strategy. According to the Munsters fandom wiki, Yvonne DiCarlo accepted the role because her husband, stuntman Bob Morgan, had been crippled during the filming of How the West Was Won, and the union refused to pay his medical bills, leaving them with dwindling savings. She needed the work. She took the role that would define the rest of her public life essentially out of financial necessity. And she was extraordinary in it. The kid playing Eddie was also a problem. Derman's portrayal of Eddie was criticized by executives as being too aggressive and overtly monstrous. There's an irony in that note that takes a moment to land. On a show about a family of monsters, the child monster was considered too monstrous. The network wanted Eddie to feel like a kid, not like a threat. Derman was replaced by Butch Patrick, who brought exactly the right energy, a boy who happened to have a widow's peak and werewolf tendencies, but who fundamentally felt like someone's actual kid. According to the Lost Media Wiki, the second pilot was the first piece of Munster-related media to feature the entire original cast of the eventual series, including Beverly Owen, and was also the first to be filmed in black and white. The switch was largely due to budget constraints with both CBS and Universal Studios, but it was also done to imitate the style of Universal's successful horror film lineup from the 1930s, which provided the basis for most of the main characters. That shift from color to black and white was not purely aesthetic then. It was economic, it was strategic, and it ended up being, completely accidentally, one of the best creative decisions the show ever made. The black and white palette gave the whole thing a texture, a slightly eerie quality that you simply cannot replicate with color. The Gothic atmosphere of 1313 Mockingbird Lane exists in a way that feels genuinely old, genuinely strange and genuinely its own thing. And a lot of that comes from that grainy, shadowed world the format created. 4 pilots in total were produced before CBS was satisfied. CBS liked both DeCarlo and Patrick, but ordered a 4th pilot in which Eddie was less spoiled. 4 separate attempts to get this right. 4 separate versions of essentially the same family before anyone was willing to greenlight the actual show. And even after all that work, the network chief still wasn't sold. In August 1964, CBS chairman William S. Paley screened the pilot, contacted head of programming Michael Dan, and demanded that the show be cut. Dan argued that it was too late to find a replacement, so Paley instructed him to fix it. The exact edit that Paley had seen was broadcast a few weeks later, to tremendous success. Soon after, an oblivious Paley remarked to Dan, "It's a good thing you fixed it, because that other one was awful." He was watching the same show. He just didn't know it. The man who had ordered the show, removed from the schedule, turned around a few weeks later and complimented the editing of a version he had declared unwatchable. You really could not script that. Building the house that Munsters built. Before we talk about what happened when the cameras actually started rolling every week, it's worth stopping to understand what it actually took to build this world, because the physical reality of making the Munsters was, by any reasonable standard, completely insane. Start with the house itself. The exterior facade was located on Universal's backlot and had originally been constructed for the 1946 film So Goes My Love. The structure had previously appeared in numerous films and television series, including Leave It to Beaver. It was redressed to appear neglected and foreboding, with the addition of a stone wall and Gothic detailing. The address nearly ended up being completely different too. According to Munster Mansion on Wikipedia, the address was at one point supposed to be 43 Mockingbird Lane, Camelot, New Jersey, but was changed to 1313 Mockingbird Lane in the city of Mockingbird Heights when shooting began. The number 1313 is one of the most recognizable addresses in American television history, and it only exists because someone, at some point before filming started, decided the original address wasn't spooky enough. Inside, the voice of the Munsters' cuckoo clock Raven was provided primarily by Mel Blanc, and if he was unavailable, veteran actor Robert Francis Hastings stepped in. The roar of the Munsters' pet Spot, who lived under the stairs, was a reused sound effect from The Deadly Mantis, and Spot's head was recycled from The Land Unknown. The show that felt like this elaborate, carefully constructed Gothic universe was, behind the curtain, patching together whatever Universal had lying around from previous monster productions, which, given that Universal had been making monster movies since the 1930s, turned out to be quite a lot. Then there was the Munster Coach. Tom Daniel, the man behind the creation of the Munster Coach, was paid just $200 by the show's producers to design the family car. The production team then called American custom car builder George Barris, who created the car at his workshop, Barris Customs, in just 21 days. The finished vehicle, built on a lengthened 1926 Ford Model T chassis with a custom hearse body, was 18 feet long and cost almost $20,000 to build. And here's the detail that makes this genuinely strange, because the same George Barris who built the Munster Coach also built the 1966 Batmobile for Batman, the very show that would eventually destroy the Munsters' ratings. The same pair of hands built both vehicles. The Monster family's car and the superhero's car came out of the same California workshop. Grandpa's dragster, the Drag-U-La, had its own story. According to Takes Me Back, the producers wanted a special car just for Grandpa, leading to the creation of Drag-U-La, a hot rod made from a real coffin. There was just one problem. Funeral homes weren't allowed to sell empty coffins unless someone had died. To get around this, George Barris's team left cash in a funeral home while borrowing a slightly damaged coffin. The result was one of the most visually distinctive vehicles in television history, complete with a bubble canopy and organ pipes for exhaust. A coffin, on wheels, driven by Count Dracula on a primetime family sitcom. Now, all of that world-building, the house, the cars, the sound effects, the carefully designed Gothic interiors, that was the scaffolding. The real production cost, the one that nobody fully prepared for, was what it took to actually put the cast into character every single day. According to Yahoo Entertainment's feature on rare behind-the-scenes photos, each day Fred Gwynne underwent a 3-hour application to transform into Herman Munster. This transformation involved wearing 40 to 50 pounds of padding, makeup, and 5-inch asphalt spreader boots. His face was painted a bright violet to optimize lighting for the black and white filming. Violet. When you watch Herman Munster in black and white, and his skin reads as that particular gray-green tone that feels so right for a Frankenstein's monster, what you're actually seeing is a man with bright purple face paint under studio lights, precisely calculated to land the correct shade on black and white film. The craft that went into that is genuinely remarkable. According to Click Americana, the actors often arrived at 5:30 in the morning to start the makeup process. 5:30. Before the sun was up, Fred Gwynne was already in the chair. Al Lewis was there too, though his situation had its own particular absurdities. According to Neatorama, Lewis's long prosthetic nose was eliminated after a few episodes because he kept getting it wet in his cups of coffee. That small, entirely undignified detail, Count Dracula repeatedly dunking his nose into his morning coffee, is somehow the perfect image for what this show actually was beneath all the monster mythology. A bunch of hard-working actors doing a completely ridiculous job with total professionalism. Between shots, a stagehand would shoot air with an air compressor up Gwynne's sleeves to relieve the heat building up inside his costume. It was essential to keep him cool, not just for his comfort, but to prevent his makeup from melting under the studio lights. This was the daily reality of making the Munsters look effortless. And yet, despite all of it, despite the purple face paint and the pre-dawn call times and the 50 pounds of padding and the nose that kept landing in the coffee, Gwynne apparently retained genuine affection for the character. According to Yahoo Entertainment, Gwynne said of Herman Munster, "I love old Herman Munster. Much as I try not to, I can't stop liking that fellow." That line tells you everything about why the show worked. The show America actually watched. Everyone else on the block, of course, sees things exactly backwards. The Munsters look terrifying. Their house looks terrifying. Herman's idea of a good-natured wave goodbye is enough to make the mailman sprint 3 blocks. And yet, crucially, not a single member of the Munster family can understand why anyone reacts to them strangely. They consider themselves completely ordinary. This is where the show's actual intelligence lives, because the joke never stops being funny precisely because the Munsters are, by every measure that actually counts, the most decent family in the neighborhood. The horror movie exterior of the characters didn't hide their warmth and sincerity, making the Munsters the epitome of a respectable family dealing with the same highs and lows as the viewers at home, albeit through a different lens. And the show understood that. Writers Ed Haas and Norm Liebman weren't just writing monster gags. They were writing about a family that wanted, more than anything, to belong somewhere, and whose tragedy was that belonging always just narrowly escaped them. That's a genuinely human story wearing a very elaborate costume. The Munsters was smarter than the average sitcom, too, metaphorically tackling social issues in not-so-subtle ways, particularly when it came to racial prejudices and segregation that were still very much a part of society at the time. The year is 1964. The Civil Rights Act had just been signed into law that summer. And here was a prime-time network sitcom about a family that looks different, that the neighbors are afraid of, that just wants to exist peacefully in a community that cannot see past their appearance. The show never announced this subtext. It didn't need to. The theme music itself became its own cultural artifact. The instrumental theme song, titled The Munsters Theme, was composed by Jack Marshall and described by writer John Burlingame as a Bernard Herrmann meets Dwayne Eddy sound, and was nominated for a Grammy Award in 1965. A television sitcom theme was nominated for a Grammy. That gives you a sense of the cultural reach this show had at its peak. Behind the camera, the production was enormously demanding. Fred Gwynne endured the most demanding makeup process as Herman Munster, who had to spend 2 hours in the makeup chair before shooting. 2 hours every single day, before a single line was filmed. According to Television Heaven, Gwynne later admitted the experience was so physically taxing that for years after the show ended, he flatly refused to even discuss the Munsters, and complained that it had seriously damaged his ability to be seen as a dramatic actor. The role that made him beloved was the role that, for a while, he almost resented. Meanwhile, the cast dynamics off-screen were complicated in ways that never made it into promotional materials. DiCarlo was able to use her clout to get the writers to change lines she didn't like, but she was unable to get herself a bigger part. She began the second season threatening to quit at the end of the year if she wasn't given more substantial material. Both she and Al Lewis begged producers to give them more to do to take some of the pressure off of Gwynne, whose character had increasingly become the central focus of the show. There's something almost poignant about that. Two immensely capable performers fighting to be given more room to work, while the machinery of television production just kept funneling everything toward the one character that tested best with audiences. The show's first season was, by any commercial measure, a genuine triumph. During its first season, 1964 to 1965, the Munsters performed strongly in the Nielsen household ratings, finishing at number 18 for the season, tying with Gilligan's Island, and consistently outperforming its similarly themed rival, The Addams Family. Tied with Gilligan's Island at number 18. For a show that its own network chairman had tried to cancel weeks before it aired, that's not just a good result. That's a remarkable story of survival. And the Golden Globes took notice. In 1965, The Munsters was nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Television Series, though it lost to The Rogues. Nominated alongside prestige programming taken seriously by the industry and pulling massive ratings. If you'd told any of the producers in early 1964, after their fourth pilot had been shot, and their network chairman was trying to have the show canceled, that within 12 months the show would be at the Golden Globes, they'd have genuinely been shocked. The year Batman knocked on the door. Here's where the turn happens, and it happens with remarkable speed. The second season of The Munsters began in the fall of 1965, and almost immediately, something was different. The writers, under pressure to keep things fresh, started swinging wider with the plots. The relatable stories, the ones that echoed the everyday commonalities with viewers, had been pushed aside for sillier, more exaggerated plots. It was as if Herman Munster had jumped the shark over the summer. The first season worked because the Munsters felt underneath everything like a real family in real situations. The second season started reaching for spectacle, and in doing so, quietly walked away from the thing that made audiences care. Wednesday's Batman ended with Robin tied to a rotating saw blade, or some similarly theatrical peril, and then Thursday's audience had to choose: find out whether Robin survived, or go check in with Herman Munster's workplace difficulties at the funeral parlor. Across the country, millions of viewers made their choice, and the Munsters felt the consequences immediately. Butch Patrick, in a 2019 interview, gave what he believes to be the primary reason for the show's demise, saying, "I think Batman was to blame. Batman just came along and took our ratings away." Patrick was the kid. He was living inside this experience in real time. And his read on what happened has the clarity of someone who watched his show bleed viewers while being powerless to stop it. According to CBR, the Batman setup episodes finished number 10 for the season, while the resolution episodes, the Thursday night episodes that aired directly against the Munsters, finished number 5. Number 5 in the national ratings, airing at the exact same time as a show that had been number 18 the previous year. The math was devastating. In its second season, ratings dropped precipitously, and the Munsters was ranked number 61, from 18 to 61, in 1 year, while competing with a show that was in the top 5. There were attempts to course-correct, conversations about what could be done to save the show, but the options were limited. There was discussion of continuing the series for another season, which would have included the introduction of Eddie's pet ape, Kogar, in an effort to boost ratings. An ape. They were going to give Eddie an ape, which, in isolation, sounds like a joke, but is actually a perfectly coherent piece of television logic from an era when adding a novelty element was a standard last resort for declining shows. Then, the color television issue arrived to complicate everything further. By 1966, the broadcast industry was shifting entirely to color production. Every major network show was going to be made in color starting that fall. And the Munsters had a problem. The show's set had been designed specifically for black and white. The carefully constructed Gothic atmosphere of 1313 Mockingbird Lane, those shadows and textures and atmospheric choices that made the house feel like somewhere between a Halloween haunted attraction and a real home, had been built around black and white cinematography. Converting it to color would require a reconstruction that neither Universal nor CBS was willing to fund for a show already hemorrhaging viewers. By this time, all television productions had shifted to color, and neither Universal nor CBS was willing to absorb the added expense for a show that was already costly to produce. Compounding these issues, Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis were exhausted and eager to return to New York. The demanding makeup process had taken a particular toll on Gwynne, and both actors had grown frustrated with the second season's scripts, which they felt were a step down from the first year. So there it is. The money problem, the ratings problem, the physical exhaustion of the leads, the creative frustration of the cast, and a competing show so dominant that it was essentially impossible to program against. The Munsters was cancelled by CBS in May 1966, just 5 months into Batman's first season. 70 episodes. 2 years. And then it was over. The final irony, the one that quietly stings a little if you think about it too long, is that Batman didn't survive much longer. The Batmania fad fizzled out by the show's second season. An attempt to bolster ratings by introducing Batgirl and only airing the show once a week didn't revive the dynamic duo's fortunes, and Batman was cancelled at the end of Season 3 in 1968. The show that killed the Munsters was cancelled 2 years later. The Monster Family and the Superhero Show, both gone by the end of the decade, were both casualties of the same volatile 1960s television landscape. After the lights went out, being cancelled didn't mean being forgotten. Far from it. Did they manage to turn it around? The family at 1313 Mockingbird Lane found something that eluded them in prime time. They found stability in syndication. Reruns of the Munsters circulated through local television markets for decades, catching audiences who'd missed the original run, introducing the show to children who had no frame of reference for the 1964 television season, but who understood immediately, instinctively, that this family was lovable. The Munsters found a large audience in syndication, and a spin-off series ensued, as well as several films, including one with a theatrical release, and several more recent attempts to reboot it. The cast attempted to keep the characters alive in various forms. A Munsters movie, Munster Go Home, was released in 1966, and The Munsters' Revenge followed in 1981. Then there was the 1988 reboot series, The Munsters Today, which tried to bridge the gap by explaining the 22-year absence through Grandpa's lab accident, putting the family to sleep, only for them to wake up in the late 1980s and have to navigate a world that had changed completely around them. The concept was clever. The execution, according to most who've revisited it, was less so. The show's cultural footprint kept growing despite, or perhaps because of, its brevity. In the 1990s, it aired on Nick at Night and then TV Land, introducing the show to an entirely new generation of viewers, kids who grew up thinking of Herman and Lily as their monsters, the same way their parents had. Rob Zombie, the musician and filmmaker, was apparently so marked by the show that he spent 20 years trying to make a feature film about the family, finally releasing it in September 2022. That's not nostalgia. That's something closer to genuine devotion. What the Munsters ultimately figured out, and what made it last in the cultural memory far longer than its ratings would have predicted, was that the joke and the heart were inseparable. You couldn't separate the comedy of Herman Munster being horrifying to everyone he met from the genuine tenderness of Herman Munster as a father and husband who just wanted his family to be happy. The monster costume was never really the point. The point was always the family inside it. The Munsters was an idea that almost died before it ever aired. Rebuilt from scratch across 4 separate pilots, nearly cancelled by its own network chairman before it hit the airwaves, and then, despite all of that, managed to become one of the most genuinely beloved television families the medium has ever produced. You should. Some families are worth meeting, no matter how long they've been gone.